I've met a lot of really, really awesome conservation-minded hunters like yourself. And, I think that it's so important to foster that conversation with people that are hunting and people like me working in conservation and on the science side of things. Because the more perspectives that you can have on an issue, the better you are going to be in the end.
Welcome to Wildlife Outdoors with your host, Russell and Jose. If you have a passion for conservation of the outdoors, or you're enjoying a calming hike in the mountains, an exhilarating kayak trip on the river, feeling a fish on the end of your line, cooking on an open flame in a primitive campsite, or stalking big game, just waiting for the perfect shot, you're in the right place. So put on your boots and polarized sunglasses and come along for the ride.
Welcome back to Wildlife Outdoors. I'm Russell, and today we're joined by Kira Cates. Kira is a herpetology technician doing boots-on-the-ground work with reptiles and amphibians. Her work focuses on conservation-driven data collection that actually informs how species and habitats are managed. If you think snakes are just something you see crossing the trail, this conversation is going to change that. Kira, welcome to Wildlife Outdoors.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you. I love animals in general, but I've always had a soft spot for snakes and really, any Herpetofauna. And but growing up, we had a lot of snakes and salamanders and turtles and iguanas and all sorts of stuff. So I've always had a soft spot for them. So how long have you been doing herpetology work for?
So I've been doing herpetology work for about a year and a half now, maybe close to 2 years. Um,
Nice.
the way I ended up doing this was actually kind of crazy. So I was working with macaws in Costa Rica, and my job there was coming to an end. So I was looking for just anything that would take me back in the States after I moved back, and I ended up as an aquarist for a little while. But then in the
Nice.
same city that I was an aquarist at, the Orion Society posted a herpetology technician position, and I was like, "Ugh, that's what I want to do. I want to work with herps. I want to work with snakes. I've followed the Orion Society for a really long time. I wanted to work there." And so I shot them an email and I was like, "Hey, I have a full-time position that I can't leave, but would you consider part-time? Because my weekends were on Tuesdays and Wednesdays." And they somehow found it in the budget to take me, and ever since then, I've been here. Eventually, I moved full-time, and
Wow.
it's been pretty great.
That's awesome. So you've done a lot of different work with, animals, it seems like. Is that something that you've always loved from a young age?
But yeah, for sure. So about the time that I learned I could not grow up to be a unicorn, I knew that animals were where it was at for sure. But growing up, definitely like you, I always had a soft spot for snakes, frogs, that sort of thing. I was always outside catching them, watching tadpoles metamorph, and all that sort of thing. So it's definitely always been in the
That's
cards for me.
awesome. Well, I'm glad that you finally landed where you're the happiest at. Yeah, it's funny because my co-host and I, Jose, so he's not on this episode. Him and I have always talked about wanting to go herping, is what we call it. And we're like, let's go get some tongs and just let's go find stuff. I didn't really know, like, obviously I know there's studies for, any type of wildlife or anything like that, but I never thought about doing it for a career for myself. But as I get older and I start learning more about conservation and the inner workings of things and how it relates to the government and how decisions are made and, scientists and departments of natural resources and things of that nature, I'm like, man, I wish I would have done that. Like, I'm almost halfway through my 30s, so it's going to be hard to make a career change. But at the same time, I'm like, man, that would have been awesome to just be able to work with animals and study them and learn the inner workings of it all.
For sure. I definitely feel lucky every single day. I mean, there have been, months at a time that I've worked 7 days a week. And for me, it doesn't feel like work. It's one of those dream situations where it's like, I enjoy going to work. I love what I do. Like, I get paid to go out and find my favorite animals. You're never going to hear me complain about that. So I definitely feel incredibly lucky to be where I'm at.
That's awesome. So it sounds like that old saying, what is it? It's you do something you love, you'll never work another day in your life.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those situations for sure.
That's awesome. So you do a
Yeah.
lot of field work, it looks like, from what I've seen on your Instagram and stuff like that. So, like, what is the core purpose of field surveys you run, and like, what questions are agencies actually trying to answer with the data you collect?
Okay, so with the Orient Society, I've worked on multiple different projects. The first position that I took that I told you about was actually informing some DoD properties of what herpetofauna they have on their property. So that was just kind of just general herp survey type deals. And then from there, I moved on to work with spotted turtles. And our projects were looking at spotted turtle nesting ecology. That's something that's really important with them because they're a declining species and they have very sensitive habitat requirements, and even more so with nesting. And there's just not a lot of studies done on that. So that was just in kind of informing management decisions and things like that for properties that have spotted turtles and nesting spotted turtles on them. Right now, I'm doing some
Sweet.
indigo work, and that's my favorite animal, the eastern indigo snake. And that's a federally threatened species that has seen significant declines across most of their range. And so the work that we're doing now are looking at some long-term sites just to monitor like populations and look at demographics. We have a pool set up right now of genetic samples that we could use for like genetic analyses and stuff like that. We are also monitoring for emergent diseases. So we monitor for SFD, which is snake fungal disease, and then invasive penistomes, which is an invasive parasite affecting a lot of our native snakes here in the Southeast. That was a lot of information.
Oh, it was great. That's perfect. I love eastern indigo snakes. The first time I saw one, I mean, it must have been 7, 8 feet. I mean, it was a good sized snake, and it scared the crap out of me because I was a kid. And then as I started getting older and I started learning about them, and because they'll go and they'll actually eat other invasive snakes and stuff like that if they're small enough, right?
Yeah, so indigo snakes are pretty snake heavy in their diet for sure. So if anything will
Mhm.
fit in their mouth, they'll eat it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what makes them so important ecologically, and like why does it stand out to you personally? Like why is it your favorite animal?
So why is it my favorite animal? But I think the answer is going to be a little bit different from that. I think it's just because, they're an absolutely impressive animal. I mean, whenever you actually get to see one in person and, if you're on a permitted survey like I am, you get to hold them, you get to process them. Seeing an animal that is that rare, but then also that just large and strong, the musculature on these guys is insane. So I think they're really cool because of that. Ecologically, I mean, they play quite a few different roles, especially both as like a predator and a prey item. So these guys are voracious whenever it comes to their appetite. They're eating at a lot lower temperatures and a lot more often than a lot of other snakes. So they're going to be controlling a lot of other populations, whether it be rodents, whether it be other snakes. Pretty much anything is on the menu for these guys. So they act as really important vectors for population control.
I didn't even
Mhm.
know about that. So I was looking kind of into them a little bit, and I saw that it says that they typically need larger connected landscapes. So how hard is it to protect a species that does not fit really inside clean boundaries of one area? And of course, I know there's like genetic bottlenecking and things of that nature, but is there anything else that makes it so hard to manage them?
Yeah, so these guys have, I believe it's the largest home range of any snake in North America. They make incredibly large movements, especially the males. So they have been documented moving over 10 miles, which if you think about moving 10 miles for a
Wow.
snake, that's kind of
Yeah.
insane, actually. Um, so that's why it's really, really important for them to have those connected habitats because without the ability to move that much, especially for males, because their home ranges, they will defend. They don't like being near other males. Um, so like they need all of the space in order to carry out all of their life history strategies, in order to breed, in order to do all the things that they need to do. And if that habitat isn't connected, they're then crossing roadways or things like that where they face a lot of road mortality. They're crossing neighborhoods where they're much more likely to face persecution because a lot of people, they see a huge, 7-foot snake and they're not about that. So it's really unfortunate the decline in this longleaf pine savanna that we've had.
Makes sense. And it's strange that, that's an aspect to look at because I had on Dr. Reed Noss out of Florida recently, and he was talking about corridors pertaining to large cats and bears. And it seems like as I look into species, almost every species seems to have some type of corridor that allows them to be able to, grow their populations. And a lot of species that are suffering, numbers wise, population wise, seems to be because they're either genetic bottlenecked or there's no corridor for them to migrate or anything like that. And seems to be across the board for most species that are struggling right now. And it's all, anthropogenic. It's all because people are building roads or people are building neighborhoods and encroaching into these spaces where these animals are. And it just seems to continue to get worse, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And then these guys have faced, such extensive collection for the pet trade and that sort of thing. So, this decline in habitat plus that, the genetics are a pretty important factor for these guys in preventing genetic bottlenecking and all of that. And in Florida specifically, I mean, there's not a lot known about populations in Florida. They're so cryptic. So once you actually get down into like peninsular Florida, they use gopher tortoise burrows a lot less. So they're a lot less predictable. And so, I mean, the genetic samples and just the ecology in general for Florida indigos is kind of like, nobody really knows what's going on for real.
So when you're out doing these studies, how much does like season, weather, habitat, and stuff affect what you're able to detect? And what are the biggest blind spots in survey data retrieval?
Ooh, so weather conditions, all that sort of thing are incredibly important. Um, Indigos are very, very prone to heat stroke. It's a large, dark animal. It's going to be absorbing a lot of sun. Um, but then on the flip side, once it gets too cold, obviously this is a cold-blooded animal, as they say. So they don't move whenever it's too cold outside. So that is something we have to take into consideration a lot whenever we're doing these surveys, which can get a bit aggravating. I know this past season we've not had super ideal conditions because it is so finicky. But yeah. And then what was the second part of your question again?
What are the biggest blind spots in survey data?
I think just because when you're dealing with any sort of herpetofauna, but especially something cryptic like an indigo snake or any sort of fossorial snakes or anything like that, it's just it's so hard to know whether or not with these population declines, whether or not it's because there really are no snakes in an area or there are so few snakes in an area, or if you're just not catching them, if you're not out in the right conditions, if you're overlooking them. Because there have been times that I have walked right past a snake and somebody else comes up behind me and it moves and then they see it and it's like, man, it really makes you think, how many have you just walked by in the field? So when you're dealing with like functionally rare species, there's always that blind spot of, human error.
I mean, they're a lot more adapted to their habitat than we are, so that
Yeah,
definitely makes
exactly.
sense.
100%.
So, like seasonally, is there like a season that you have to go after certain species or try to study certain species? Because I know that a lot of reptiles will like, I don't remember the term for it, but it's like hibernating. It's like ruminate or something like
Brumate.
that.
Yeah. So there's some brumate, some excavate. Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely going to depend on the type of animal that you're looking for and the purpose that you're looking for it. Um, so I know for spotted turtles, you start looking for those a lot in the spring, but on my project where I was looking at nesting ecology, I went a lot longer than a lot of people will look for them because I was looking at their nesting ecology, for lack of another expression. So I
I
tracked
see.
them way, way into the summer, which is not when people normally start looking for them, because a lot of times they'll kind of estivate whenever the water gets real low, and whenever it gets real, real hot like that, they'll come up and they'll kind of lay in patches of leaves or under fallen trees or things like that. But
I see. That makes sense. Yeah, I know that here in Arkansas they had they do bear den studies, and so typically, obviously, if you're going to study a bear and you're going to be doing a bear den study, you're going to do it when they're hibernating.
yeah,
So it's kind of like a signifier of what the next year's health is going to be in populations and things like that. So I wasn't sure if it was the same in the herpetology world or not. So from what you see in the field, like what human activities create the biggest long-term problems for reptiles and amphibians?
ooh, I mean that's a big question because it's kind of a multi-pronged issue. So I mean, of course, there are issues with collection and things like that. Poachers that are out in the field every day. You hear stories all the time, a lot more than you think, especially with turtles. collection of turtles is kind of an insane issue. Um, but then, of course,
Really?
development. Yeah, yeah. Turtle collection is kind of like mafia style stuff. I mean, they have sting operations and all sorts of stuff. It's really crazy.
Really?
Um, hmm
That's
and it's
that's
really
insane.
unfortunate. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. But then, like we talked about
Yeah.
earlier, I mean, development, especially in places like Florida, I mean, these animals are having so many issues. There's nowhere for them to go. Um, so many vital habitats because indigos are super, super dependent on gopher tortoises and gopher tortoise burrows, especially as you get into like Panhandle, Florida, and above. Um, and a lot of those burrows are getting just completely wiped out. Even in some areas, they're just taking gopher tortoises and removing them to somewhere else, which, that's better than just barreling over the burrow itself with the tortoise
Right.
inside. But gopher tortoise burrows are home and necessary for over 300 species. And so when you
Wow.
remove a gopher tortoise from the habitat and you move it somewhere else, while you might be saving that tortoise, you are leaving behind 300 other species that now have nowhere to go. And that is the truth for indigo snakes as well. So, I mean, it's really a hard question to answer about what
Mhm.
aspect of these anthropogenic forces are causing the most issues, just because everything is compounding. And herpetofauna are overlooked so often in these scenarios. Other than some characteristic species, like you do have people that speak up for, sea turtles and gopher tortoises are kind of getting a little more popular and things like that. But usually they're very much overlooked. So there's a lot of things compounding to cause these issues.
Why do you think that is that they're overlooked so often?
I mean, a lot of it is just their view in society. A lot of people either, at the best case scenario, a lot of people don't care about snakes, don't care about frogs, that sort of thing. A lot of people are scared of them, so they're actively wanting them to go away from them. They're actively wanting them not to be in their yards, not to be in their homes, that sort of thing. So it's not something that's causing an uproar with a lot of people like you see with a lot of like the furry mammals and the cute mammals. Because I love a bear as much as the next person. They're awesome. They're great. They're super cute. But I have those same feelings about indigo snakes, about rattlesnakes, that sort of thing. And I don't think a lot of people do, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, that's true. One thing that I recently found out is like you're a lot of people just kill snakes all the time, and that's actually illegal. Like, oh, I'm gonna kill this water moccasin or I'm gonna kill this rattlesnake. And and I think it's kind of a blanket statement in a lot of verbiage from the natural resource agencies, but it's almost like okay, if it doesn't have a hunting season, it's not legal to kill type of thing. So it almost seems like they kind of don't enforce it as much as they should. And I just feel like that's a real strange thing because there are so many protected species that I feel are just kind of being overlooked, not only by society and as a whole, but potentially by natural resource agencies. And I just feel like there should be a little bit more enforcement on that.
No, absolutely. I 100% agree. And I think a big part of that is even with a lot of the enforcement on these issues, they're very game species focused, which is
Hmm.
incredibly important. Obviously, we need a lot of regulations on game species because those are species that are actively seeing take from people. So that's really important. But that's where a lot of the focus is because that's where a lot of the funding is. There's not a lot of funding for herpetofauna, and then even with game species, I mean, there's not a lot of funding for law enforcement as it is. So I think a big answer to that would be further education and further funding to natural resource departments and stuff like that that are specifically for, say herpetofauna poaching or illegal take or something like that. I could definitely get on board for that. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about how seasonally population numbers can like data can seem to change because whether you see them or you don't. So what does like real recovery look like? And speaking because you've been researching the indigo snake, how do you know that you've reached a benchmark to where you know that it's actually going in a positive trend, or if it's not, because it can be so different trying to locate them?
Right. So that's definitely going to be a better question for someone that does more statistics than I do. But from what I do know, It's going to be definitely dependent on the issue that you're trying to address. So, our indigo snakes, for example, a big benchmark for us, we have been working on some reintroduction sites. This isn't a project I work on specifically, but the Orient Society and partners do that project. And a big deal for them was in Alabama, for example. The indigo snake had been completely extirpated from the state of Alabama. And so they were working with partners to reintroduce the indigo snake. And with reintroductions, that can be kind of a tricky, finicky process because you can release a lot of individuals, but that doesn't mean a lot of individuals are going to establish themselves. That doesn't mean a lot of individuals are going to reproduce, which is ultimately what you want. You want a self-sustaining population. But recently, at both reintroduction sites, there have been signs of breeding, which is a huge milestone and hopefully a sign of success for a project like that.
That's awesome. And I bet probably for the indigo snake in particular, there's probably not very many other snakes that can fill that ecological niche in the area that it's been extirpated from. So I would hope that could be a good signifier of, possibilities of success to reintroduction.
Yeah, definitely. I would think so, hopefully.
All
And
right,
then it was
fingers crossed for that
similar.
one for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a similar thing. Another project that I worked on was the breed and release program for endangered great green macaws and scarlet macaws with the Macaw Recovery Network. So a little bit different, but a very similar situation in which, these macaws have been vastly extirpated from large portions of their range for various reasons, largely overcollection and then loss of habitat. It's kind of a common theme among different
Mhm.
groups of animals. Um,
Yeah.
but the goal with that was also to establish self-sustaining populations. And so it was really cool. They have, teams of rangers, and in the north in Serapiki for the Great Greens, they have these teams of women rangers, which was super, super awesome. And they would go out and monitor these released populations until they started seeing breeding happening, and especially successful breeding whenever they actually got individuals to fledge all on their own. And so that was another big hallmark of success, was not only breeding, but successful successful recruitment into the population.
So what took you down there to even, I mean, because that's like a big life change going from America to Costa Rica to work macaws, right? So what led to that?
So that definitely was a big change. So as I said, I was a little lost in college. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, other than I knew I wanted to work with animals. So some stuff happened and I kind of needed to stay home for a little bit. So my first job out of college was actually as an elementary school teacher. I taught elementary social studies and English. Very, very different. And I appreciate that experience. I learned a lot. Um, I enjoy teaching. That's something I actually found that I do have somewhat of a passion for. Just I needed to be outside. I needed to be with animals. So after that year of teaching, I was looking for any kind of internship, any kind of way to get my foot back into the door of conservation, of field work, of that sort of thing. And I just came across an ad for an internship with the Macaw Recovery Network. And I was like, you know what? I don't have anything tying me down. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have anything like that. Let me just apply and see. And long story short, I got it. And so I spent 8 months in Costa Rica, and
That's
it was
awesome.
phenomenal. I got a lot better at Spanish.
I would hope so. Kind of
Yeah,
being immersed in it.
literally.
So what all did you do other than work there? I feel like if I got a job or an internship or something in a different country, I would probably explore so much and try to see every corner of the place. So I'm assuming you did the
Yeah.
same. It looks like you like to travel. So
Yeah. I did as much as I could. So the work was pretty intensive. It was sometimes 6, 7 days a week. But when I
mhm.
could, obviously, I was out herping. Um, I was still kind of, I guess you could say, a baby herper at the time. I wasn't super sure of what I was doing, but I got some pretty lucky finds. I found some spiloides, found parrot snake, found lots of cat-eyed snakes, that sort of thing. Super awesome stuff. Couple boas. That was really impressive. Um, but yeah, I went to Monteverde and saw quetzales, which was really cool. Um, and then the place that I was at was actually just kind of this small little town, village type place, but it was a 15-minute walk to the beach. And so a lot of
That's
times,
awesome.
Yeah, a lot of times after work, I'd go there. I kind of learned how to surf. I wouldn't call myself a surfer or say that I'm very good, but I have surfed. I did get smashed by the waves a lot, so
That's something that I've never been able to do. I don't know what it is. I used to skateboard and I'm good on rollerblades, but you throw me on a surfboard, I can't do it. I can't boogie board, I can't wakeboard, anything like that for some reason I can't do. I went to Breckenridge and hopped on a snowboard just fine. So I don't know. It must be something with the water, which is weird because like I love water and I've always said if I could live in water, I would. Like I just love being in water, but I just cannot seem to figure out the wake surfing or the surfing or the kneeboarding or anything of that nature for some reason.
it's totally different being at the mercy of the ocean.
Yes, that is true. So, how did like working in Costa Rica change the way that you view like conservation? Because that was your first conservation job. And so, whenever you came back here, what are the differences between conservation there and conservation here?
Ooh, interesting question. So, difference between conservation there versus here. Um, hmm. It's hard to compare because what I was doing there was a captive breeding program. So there
I see.
wasn't as much of a field component. And I was a little bit less involved with research there. So I'm not
I see.
entirely sure that the two things are fully comparable. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, sorry if that's not a super satisfying answer, but
Oh, no. That's it's just it's a curiosity question of mine because I've had people on from Australia, New Zealand, and things like that, and talking in terms of conservation and outdoor recreation, there's massive differences between the US and how things are regulated in different countries. So I wasn't sure if it was an even fair question to ask in terms of conservation, and field study and research from a different country to the US. And I've never I don't think I've ever talked to anybody else that has done conservation work in a different country. So it was just a curiosity question. So we talked a little bit earlier about how snakes kind of get the short end of the stick in terms of conservation sometimes, and I think a lot of what could play into that, like you mentioned, is probably fear of snakes. And so you do a lot of things on your Instagram and on social media showing snakes. And is that something where you kind of hope to educate the public a little bit more on snakes are really nothing to be afraid of? Of course, you need to respect them because they can be dangerous, especially if you try to handle them and you're not experienced. But it almost seems like there's a bridge that could potentially be gapped with the use of social media.
of course. So that's something I'm quite passionate about. And the way that I view it, and something that I always say, is that I will never ask people not to be scared of snakes. I think that is a valid fear to have. It is, an
Mhm.
animal that you should absolutely, as you said, respect. And, I don't think that the fear of them is necessarily bad. I just ask that people don't automatically destroy because they don't understand or because they fear. I want them to be able to reckon within themselves and when they're within their minds that they can be like, okay, I have this fear of this animal. That does not mean that it deserves to die. It does not mean that it doesn't deserve to live, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the approach that I try to take with my social media because I don't, I wouldn't recommend that most people go do what I do. I wouldn't recommend that most people just
Right.
go and pick up snakes and that sort of thing. It's very dangerous. If you don't do it correctly, it could be dangerous for the animal as well. So that I think for me, it's more about addressing how people address their own fear is kind of the approach that I use.
That makes sense. Have
Yep.
you been a part of any situation with an individual or a group of people to where, like, your education efforts, how you've seen something come from it and how they react to certain animals?
So yes. And I've gotten to be with a few people in person that, they've asked me to take or for me to take them with me to go find snakes and stuff like that. I get DMs all of the time from people sending me pictures of snakes and they're like, "Oh, like, this used to would have scared me, but I just stayed and watched it because of you," and stuff like that. Always makes my day. Something that really,
I was
really
about to say
made
that's
me
awesome.
happy. Yeah, it makes me happy. It makes my day whenever that happens for sure. Something that made me really happy was my own dad. Um, he grew up an outdoorsman. He grew up just a country boy living in the woods, right? But he's kind of always had the mindset of like, oh, like if it's a rattlesnake, you got to kill it, that sort of thing. But he not too long ago sent me a video that he took of a timber rattler, and he was watching it cross the road, and I was like, wow, that's such a beautiful snake. That's so cool. And he responded and he was like, yeah, he was just doing his own thing. Like, he didn't deserve to die. I helped him across the road because I heard some hunters coming up the road and that sort of thing. And I was like, ah, this is so beautiful. If I could just get everyone to be like this, like,
It almost seems like it's humans' first nature to want to kill a snake, though, and I don't agree with that. And don't get me wrong, there, in my past I have killed snakes. Typically, it's been in heavily populated areas with children and stuff like that. So I guess you can kind of emotionally justify that. But at the same time, they were just kind of doing their own thing. And there's been numerous times I've come across them in the wild, not just I'm in awe and I'll take pictures and whatever else. But it seems like that's almost first instinct for people to be like, oh, it has to die because it can bite somebody. And I mean, I've heard that countless times throughout my life. So me myself, I've actually educated a few people on saying, hey, it has its own ecological niche. It's here for a reason. It does its own thing. If you don't bother it, it won't bother you. And my young daughters, I've taught her that, and she is gung ho, I swear. And she wants to pick up every snake she finds now because she loves them and they're gorgeous and they're beautiful. And but she's that way with every animal. Can't name how many times she's brought spiders to me. Look how cute it is. And I'm just like, yeah, you don't know if that one's venomous or not. It's not. I'm like, you're not wrong, but you don't know that. she
a girl
she
after
loves
my own
animals
heart.
so much. I know, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, I remember one time she was probably 4 and we were hiking over here, and I found this little ringneck snake. I mean, tiny little thing. And I picked it up and I was showing it to her, and she had an absolute meltdown because I wouldn't let her hold it. And I was like, I don't know very many little girls that cry because you don't let them hold a snake.
That is so cute. I love that so much.
She loves it. So you're obviously doing studies on snakes that are endangered or have declining populations. So how do you stay positive as you're going through the process?
Um, I I guess because this is something that I've wanted to do since I was little, and with the rise of social media and TV and documentaries and all of that, the destruction of nature and Mother Earth has been something that I've been privy to since I was a child. So I think it's something that I've grown up learning how to manage my emotions about. I think also in the process of carrying out what field work you need to do, carrying out that sampling, carrying out the processing, that sort of thing, it's almost like it gives you a one-track mind. So it's like you have to do this task, this task, this task. And that just kind of lets you put one foot in front of the other without getting too
Mhm.
gloom and doom. And that's not to say that there aren't bad days. Um, I mean, sometimes at the end of the day, especially with some of my coworkers and stuff, we just have to sit around a fire and drink a little bit and be like, man, like we really chose a field, didn't we? Um, but for the most part, having that kind of process to fall back on, just to put one foot in front of the other, and then also, like I said, I'm having coworkers to talk about that with and kind of share that burden with,
Mhm.
and having that sort of community definitely helps. Because especially in this day and age, it can get very, very gloom and doom very fast. You're constantly getting bombarded with negative images and bad news and all of this sort of thing. And it can get almost like you have blinders on and you can only see the bad. But then realizing that you have other people that are also fighting this fight and doing what they can to preserve species, protect habitats, and that sort of thing is so, so important and so, so helpful.
Absolutely. And that kind of plays into what I want my podcast to be is, there's so many people out there that, oh, well, there's animal rights activists and then there's hunters, and everybody seems to be pitting against each other. And I feel like there's a happy median where everybody could get what they want. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding on both sides of it. And so that's kind of where I want my podcast to land in the middle, is to be able to have people from, both aspects come on and talk openly about, their feelings and what is going on in the world of conservation. And it's interesting because, me, I'm a fisherman and a hunter, and it's an interesting dichotomy by a lot of conservation based hunters and conservation minded hunters, that we love the animals so much. But we also understand that there has to be responsible harvest of said animal, no matter what kind of, whether it's going to be, a bear, a deer, an elk, a moose, whatever the case may be, you have to do it responsibly. And there's some people out there that look at, bag limits as a goal, not as a limit. And I kind of want to be more of a educational aspect for people to like not only just listen to entertaining podcasts and see videos, but to also get something from it and understand we don't always have to take the max. Like it's a limit for a reason. Take what you need when it comes
Mhm.
to harvest and conservation. So it's kind of one of those interesting things where I can kind of relate to your feelings and how I feel about conservation as well, and the
Yeah,
hunting aspect of things.
absolutely. I love that. I So I am not a hunter myself, but growing up, my family was, especially my dad. We grew up very poor. So, deer hunting in the winter was how we put food on the table. So a lot of people look at me and, they see the septum piercing, they see my makeup, and they see my conservation posts, and they assume that I'm very anti-hunting or that I'm not for hunting, and that's actually the furthest thing from the truth. I've met a lot of really, really awesome conservation-minded hunters like yourself, seemingly. And I think that it's so important to foster that conversation with people like that and have that understanding with people that are hunting and out in nature and out in the outdoors with people like me working in conservation and on the science side of things. Because the more perspectives that you can have on an issue, the better you are going to be in the end. Like that sort of diversity in backgrounds and mindsets can only lead to positive for everyone. So I think that's really a beautiful message to kind of foster that understanding between those two groups.
And I feel the same way, and that's what I'm most passionate about. I love animals, but I'm most passionate about educating the masses and helping find that happy medium, because
Mhm.
it's unfortunately it seems like everybody wants to be at their throats, and there's so much division in this world. And it's like in the world of conservation, if people are at each other's throats, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to benefit, and it's just going to continue to stay separated. And so I want to bridge that gap. And I've had a few people on the podcast that are authors or artists or photographers that don't do too much outdoor recreation, or they don't hunt, they don't fish, but they're kind of more conservation minded and take only pictures, leave only footsteps, stuff like that. And I like to try to bridge those conversations along with the episodes where I have hunters and fishers and guides and things of that nature on. So yeah, it's just what I'm passionate about and what I'm hoping to get out of these podcast episodes. So I appreciate you hopping on and talking about the science behind a lot of it, because it's rare that we can actually get scientists on the show for some reason. I've reached out to so many of them, so many different biologists, and it almost seems like they're scared that a narrative is going to get painted a certain way being a outdoor recreation podcast.
Mhm.
So I'm happy that you're taking some time out of your day to hop on here with me. So I appreciate that.
No, of course. It's really been awesome. And I think that the CEO of Warrior Society follows you, and he's a big hunter.
Really?
So, yeah.
Hmm,
So, if you're watching this,
that's
Chris,
awesome.
hey.
Shout out. So when people say they love wildlife, what do you wish they understood about the work required to actually protect it?
That's a great question. So, from a more selfish standpoint, I think I wish they understood that working and protecting wildlife isn't all just fun and games. It's not all just, oh, I get to go and play with animals all day. I mean, indigo snakes are my favorite animal, and a lot of the times processing them and working with them feels more of like a sterile environment, because I have a goal that I have to do. I have to hike 6 miles in a day to try to find these things, and it's exhausting, and it's either cold or it's hot, and I'm getting blisters and I'm covered in cactus and all of this sort of thing. So it's definitely not a glamorous job. I'm glad that, people appreciate it. I'm glad that people think it's cool, but it's definitely not just all fun and games like they believe.
That's a very similar answer to a question that I asked. I cannot remember. His name is Michael. I cannot remember his last name, but he is the one that headed up the project for the removal of the Burmese pythons down in South Florida. And
Mm,
he is a snake lover through and through. And it was interesting because when I was talking to him, like you could just feel his passion about snakes and how much he loves snakes. And his job is to remove them. And
yep.
it's he he wanted people to understand that it's not just going out because, of course they created the bounty. And when you hear a bounty on an animal, people think, oh, it's like the Wild West. They're just gonna go out there and everybody's gonna kill them and try to make money. And he's like, no, it's actually, you have to be permitted to do so, and you have to be
Yeah.
licensed. You have to go through a process, and it's a whole thing to even be permitted to be able to do that. And so he was kind of like explaining that, but his answer was kind of the same thing. Like, it's not what it seems to be and how people talk about it. And so that
Yeah.
seems to be a common theme in people that are, that do conservation work for a living.
Yeah. It's definitely a dichotomy between, going out hiking, having fun versus actually out doing the work, doing the science, that sort of thing. Absolutely.
For sure. Well, talking on hiking and going out and doing fun stuff. So it looks like you like to travel quite a bit. So do you have a favorite trip you've ever been on?
Oh,
That's probably a loaded
man.
question.
I don't even know how to pick. I mean, honestly, I don't know if it counts as a trip since I lived there, but my recall work in Costa Rica was probably the most transformative. I think I gained a lot of confidence on that trip. I learned a lot about working in NGOs. I learned a lot about snakes in general, even though that's not what I was working with. Um, being immersed in the culture and learning the language and that sort of thing was beautiful. So I just don't know if that counts as a trip. um,
I would count it as a trip, a very long extended trip.
A very extended trip, I'll take that. And then traveling around to, like, Monteverde, seeing endangered birds and that sort of thing was super, super cool. But I don't know, I mean, I took a
That's
trip to
awesome.
Alaska, which was super cool. That was
That's
that was
awesome.
longer than I'd like to admit ago. Got to see orcas, that was phenomenal. It was actually kind of
That's awesome.
insane. So we were on this boat, and in the distance, there was just like some splashing going on. And so I kind of looked over, and I'm pretty sure what I was seeing was actually like a pod of orcas separating a mother gray whale from her calf, which was, I
Wow.
mean, depressing, but also National Geographic moment. It was insane.
Right.
Yep.
That's crazy. So where all did you
It
go in
was really
Alaska?
crazy. So I went to Ketchikan and Juneau, I think were the two places.
Nice.
Yep.
I'm from Alaska originally. That's why I ask. But I'm
Oh,
from inland. I'm from
really?
Fairbanks. Yeah. So I love it
Interesting.
up
How
there.
did
I
you end
haven't
up in
been back.
Arkansas?
I've been all over the place. I lived in, well, I didn't live in Alaska for very long. My entire family is still up there. My blood family is still up there. And I lived in Arizona for 8 years, lived in Texas for 18 years. I've been in Arkansas for like 6 years now. So I've lived all over the place. But yeah, I'm actually an Athabascan native from up there. And majority of my blood family, both my mom's and my father's side are up there. So yeah, I love it. I don't know if I would ever live there in the winter because last time I was there in the winter, I think it got to negative 60 something and it was horrible. But
That's
I
a
love
valid
the
take.
summers up there. Yeah, right. But I've actually never been coastal up there, believe it or not. The
Really?
people in my family aren't really too much of outdoorsmen, so it's
Um,
on my father's side they're not too much of outdoorsmen. On my mom's side, I think my mom's sister married a man that is like he used to like archery hunt moose and stuff. But I don't have too much family up there that is really outdoorsy. Typically, we'll go to Angel Rocks and do some hiking and stuff like that, or go to the hot springs in Chino. Yeah, I've never been coastal out there. Never been halibut fishing or salmon fishing or anything like that, but it's definitely up
yeah.
there on my list. I want to go out there and just experience everything that Alaska has to offer.
It truly is a frontier. I got to go up there and see the
It
Hubbard
is.
Glacier, see it calving and all that sort of thing, which,
That's
I'm
awesome.
not a fisherwoman myself, but I don't know if I would deny the chance to go and fish some salmon. I think
Right.
that would be an experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I love food. Like I'm a foodie through and through. So if, I just can't think of anything more fresh than just catching just wild caught salmon like that and being able to enjoy a meal. Like that would be awesome.
Mhm. Yeah. I
But I
could
do
get
love the
behind that
berries
for
up
sure.
there.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we used to go hike in Angel Rocks up there, and there's wild blueberries, wild strawberries, everything like that, and there's natural springs, and so you could really just go up there and have a picnic without taking anything except for a bottle to capture your water in. And I remember last time I was up there, we went hiking, and I had an Aquafina bottle that I had finished, and then I just filled it up with the spring water. The spring water must have been like 50 something degrees. Excuse me,
Ooh.
must have been like 50 something degrees, and whenever you got it in the bottle it would start condensing on the outside. It just was like looked like you pulled it out of a refrigerator. It was so good.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, Alaska truly is an amazing place. So, and
Mm.
I actually just the last episode that I posted it yesterday, was actually a group of guys that went up there and did a elk hunt on a Fognac Island, and
Mhm.
it was they described the whole hunt, and it was a drawn hunt and all that stuff. And um, as they were just telling the story, I was just up there imagining like God, because I haven't been to the area that they were hunting at, but just thinking about the wilderness there, and it's just so wild and so untouched, and it truly is something special, something that needs to be
Mm.
protected.
For sure. I agree with that through and through.
Yeah, and there's a lot of lands like that unfortunately seem to be on the chopping block nowadays. But and that's another thing that I'm passionate about is just protecting public lands. You know, it's something that keeps the U.S. unique. You know, most places in the world don't have lands that are public for the people that live there, and something we have special here. So definitely a lot of things that need to be protected.
That's one thing I do appreciate about all this is I think that's a topic that has really gotten both sides to listen to each other a little more because that's one thing they can always agree on is protecting public lands.
Absolutely. Outdoorsmen, people that just love being outside, and people that obviously just care about nature. And it seems like from both sides of the aisle, people are coming together, and it's a great thing.
For sure.
So before we go ahead and get out of here, is there anything you want to promote?
Yeah, so I have actually recently paired with World Packers, and I'm going to be hosting a trip to Thailand in May. So I think it's May 24th to 28th. And we're going to
It's
be
exciting.
visiting and volunteering at an ethical elephant sanctuary. And this
Wow.
sanctuary is run by an ethnic minority, the Karen people. And they have been fighting to kind of get the elephant reintroduced and protected in northern Thailand. So I think it'll be a really cool experience. We'll be doing some traditional like Thai cooking classes, some language classes, both the Karen language and then also the Thai language, stuff like that, and really get immersed in the culture as well as contributing to the conservation. So if
That's
anybody
awesome.
is interested in that, just head over to my Instagram, join the WhatsApp group, that sort of thing.
That's awesome. And I'll make sure I put a link in the description so the people that are watching can go ahead and check it out. And how did that even come
Perfect.
about?
So they actually reached out to me about potentially collaborating with them and becoming a host. So this will be my first time hosting a trip like that. But I mean, I've traveled a good bit as we talked about, and I looked into this sanctuary a lot because there's a lot of not so ethical elephant sanctuaries out
Mhm.
there, and I didn't want to contribute to something like that. But kind of vetted this out. It all seems good, and I'm really excited about it.
That's awesome. Well, like I said,
Hmm.
I'll put the link in the description, and
Perfect.
hopefully everything goes as expected. It sounds like it's a great opportunity to get out, learn some new things, and also make a difference. So that's an amazing thing, and best of luck with that. But everybody that's watching to the end, we appreciate y'all watching to the end, and we'll catch y'all next time.
This has been Wildlife Outdoors. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook at Wildlife Outdoors and on Instagram at wild.life.outdoors. Let's go live life on the wild side.